In the grimy heart of Port Sterling, a city that eats its own, a man named Isaiah Washington found peace in the roar of a forge. He was a creator, shaping raw steel into art with the same hands that once held the fate of nations. To the city, he was just another black business owner, a nail sticking up, waiting for a hammer. And the hammer came, in the form of three corrupt cops led by the venomous Sergeant Rick O'Malley. They saw an easy target, a simple shakedown. What they couldn't see was the warrior beneath the surface, a man forged in the unforgiving fires of Delta Force. They came to rob a business. They ended up declaring war on a commander who never, ever loses. The air in Washington Ironworks always tasted of ozone and hot metal, a metallic tang that Isaiah Washington had come to associate with peace. It was a stark contrast to the flavors of his old life, the dust of Kandahar, the humid rot of the jungle, the coppery tang of fear and blood. Here in the sprawling brick warehouse he'd painstakingly refurbished in a neglected corner of Port Sterling, the only battles were against the stubborn will of steel. His massive frame, usually hidden under a heavy leather apron, moved with an economy of motion that belied his size. Every step was deliberate, every swing of the hammer precise. Today he was working on a commission for the new high-rise downtown, a massive, intricate security gate designed to look like a sprawling willow tree. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was building a barrier to keep the world out, just as he had built one around himself. Isaiah was 42, but the harsh miles of his past were etched around his eyes. His head was shaved clean, and a dense, neatly trimmed beard framed a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was a quiet man. His employees, a young apprentice named Kevin and a seasoned welder named Maria, respected his silence. They knew he was a veteran. The faded first SFODD tattoo, partially visible on his forearm when he rolled up his sleeves, was a clue. But they didn't ask questions. His demeanor commanded respect, not through intimidation, but through an unnerving calmness, a sense that he was observing everything all at once. His business was his sanctuary. It was successful, built on a reputation for uncompromising quality and artistic vision. He'd poured every cent of his combat pay and his life savings into it. It was a testament to a new life, a promise to himself that he could build something permanent and beautiful in a world he had once only known how to dismantle. But Port Sterling was a city of predators, and success, especially for a black man in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, was like blood in the water. The vultures arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a mud-splattered, unmarked Ford Crown Victoria that rolled to the curb with practiced quiet. Sergeant Rick O'Malley stepped out of the passenger side. O'Malley was a man whose ambition had long ago curdled into resentment. He had a thick neck, a florid face, and the kind of dead-eyed smile that didn't reach his eyes. He saw the city not as a community to protect, but as a personal fiefdom to be plundered. With him were Officer Kyle Bishop, young, arrogant, and chiseled like a recruitment poster, with a cruelty that he mistook for strength, and Officer Frank Miller, older, paunchy, with weary eyes that had seen too much and done too little to stop it. Miller was the reluctant anchor on their chain of corruption, his guilt a constant, low hum beneath the swagger of the other two. "Look at this place," O'Malley grunted, his gaze sweeping over the restored brickwork and custom steel signage of Washington Ironworks. "Bet you a steak dinner this guy's moving more than wrought iron out of here. No way he's paying for all this on custom mailboxes." Bishop smirked. "Looks like a prime candidate for the asset forfeiture initiative, Sarge. Probably got stacks of cash from his other business sitting in a safe." "That's what I'm thinking," O'Malley said, clapping Bishop on the shoulder. "Let's go make a civic contribution." They didn't enter with sirens or a warrant held high. They strolled in as if they owned the place, their presence immediately sucking the warmth out of the forge. The rhythmic clang of Isaiah's hammer faltered, then stopped. He placed the heavy tool on his anvil and turned, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes, dark and analytical, took in everything in a single, sweeping glance. Three men. O'Malley, the leader, positioned centrally. Bishop, the enforcer, hands flexing, standing slightly forward. Miller, the weak link, hanging back, avoiding eye contact, his gaze drifting towards the exit. "Help you, officers?" Isaiah's voice was a low baritone, calm and even, betraying no alarm. O'Malley sauntered forward, running a gloved hand over a finished tabletop made of polished steel and reclaimed oak. Rick O'Malley, Port Sterling PD, just doing a routine check on local businesses, making sure everything's on the up and up. He peered into the back office. You the owner, Isaiah Washington? I am, Isaiah said, not moving an inch. He could smell the stale coffee and cheap power on them. He'd smelled it on Iraqi police in Fallujah and Afghan National Army colonels in the Helmand province. It was the universal scent of petty tyrants. Got a lot of expensive equipment in here, Mr. Washington, Bishop chimed in, his eyes scanning the state-of-the-art plasma cutter and the row of TIG welders. Business must be good. The implication hung heavy in the air. Too good. It is, Isaiah replied, his gaze locking onto Bishop's. I work hard. O'Malley chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. I'm sure you do. We've had some anonymous tips about suspicious activity in this area. Unlicensed distribution. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? It was the classic opening gambit, the manufactured pretext. Isaiah felt a familiar switch flip in his mind. The artisan receded, and the operator took his place. His pulse remained steady at 60 beats per minute. He was no longer in his workshop. He was in a hostile environment, assessing a threat. The only thing I distribute is custom metalwork, Isaiah said flatly. We'll see about that, O'Malley said, his smile vanishing. We have reason to believe this establishment is involved in laundering money for a criminal enterprise. We're going to have to take a look around. He produced a piece of paper from his jacket. It was a search warrant, but Isaiah knew with absolute certainty that the probable cause it was based on was a fiction written by O'Malley himself. Maria and Kevin had stopped working, frozen by the tension. Isaiah gave them a slight nod. Take a break. Go get some lunch. It was a dismissal and a command to ensure they weren't caught in the middle. They scurried out, casting worried glances back at their boss. Nice of you to clear the room for us, Bishop sneered. The moment they were gone, the pretense of civility dropped. Bishop roughly shoved past Isaiah and kicked over a rack of steel rods, sending them clattering across the concrete floor. Miller flinched at the sound. Hey, take it easy, Miller started, but O'Malley shot him a look that silenced him. Start with the office, Kyle, O'Malley ordered. Frank, you check the lockers. Isaiah stood perfectly still, a silent monolith in the center of the chaos. He watched them, not with the fear they expected, but with the cold, detached focus of a predator studying its prey. He tracked their movements, noted their sloppy search patterns, the way Bishop opened drawers without checking the sides, the way O'Malley was focused only on finding cash. They weren't professionals. They were thugs with badges. Bishop emerged from the office holding a metal cash box. Bingo, Sarge. O'Malley took it and pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside was nearly $15,000 in cash. It was the deposit for the Willow Tree Gate paid that morning. Well, what have we here? That's a lot of cash for a legitimate business to have lying around. It's a client deposit. The receipt is in the box, Isaiah said, his voice dangerously low. I'm sure it is, O'Malley said, pocketing the cash. This is evidence. We're seizing it under civil forfeiture laws pending an investigation. He then pointed to the new plasma cutter, a piece of equipment worth over $50,000. That too, probably bought with dirty money. This was their game, not just a shakedown, but outright theft under the color of law. They would seize the assets, file a confusing report, and the property would disappear into a legal black hole, eventually sold at a police auction with the proceeds funneled back into their department's discretionary fund or their own pockets. Most victims, intimidated and outmatched by the system, would never see their property again. They spent another 20 minutes turning the place upside down, creating a theatrical mess designed to intimidate. Through it all, Isaiah remained silent. He memorized their faces, the cadence of their speech, the call signs he heard crackling on Miller's radio. He noted the slight tremor in Miller's hands, the brand of cigarettes O'Malley smoked, the scuff marks on Bishop's boots. Every detail was data. Every insult was a file being stored away for later retrieval. As they prepared to leave, Bishop discovered a small baggie of white powder under a workbench, a plant so obvious it was insulting. Look what I found, Sarge, Bishop said with mock surprise. O'Malley picked it up. "We could arrest you right now, Washington, but we're generous. We'll just take this evidence, along with the cash and the equipment, and be on our way. I'd advise you to forget this ever happened. Consider it the cost of doing business in my city." They laughed as they walked out, leaving Isaiah in the wreckage of his sanctuary. They saw a man defeated, a victim they had successfully cowed into submission. They were wrong. They hadn't just robbed a business owner. They had pushed a sleeping giant. As the Crown Victoria's taillights disappeared down the street, Isaiah Washington stood in the quiet chaos of his shop. He wasn't angry. Anger was a luxury, a hot emotion that clouded judgment. What he felt was something colder, something far more dangerous. He felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known since he'd traded his rifle for a hammer. The war had come home, and Commander Isaiah "Zay" Washington was about to run an operation on his own soil. The hours after the raid were a study in absolute control. Another man would have raged, called a lawyer, or sunk into despair. Isaiah Washington did none of these things. He methodically began to clean his workshop. He stacked the scattered steel rods, swept the floor, and righted the overturned furniture. The physical act of restoring order was a focusing ritual, a way to channel the cold fury coiling in his gut into productive thought. While his hands worked, his mind operated on a different plane. He was already breaking down the problem, field stripping it like an M4 carbine. The objective was not revenge. Revenge was messy and emotional. The objective was justice, absolute and final. But he wouldn't find it through the system. He knew the system. He'd seen it work and fail in a dozen countries. He knew that O'Malley's crew was not an anomaly. They were a symptom of a rot that was protected by unions, legal loopholes, and a culture of silence. To report them to internal affairs would be to report a shark bite to the other sharks. They would circle the wagons, bury his complaint in paperwork, and retaliate with overwhelming force. He'd be arrested on the planted drug charge, and his life would be over. No, he would not fight them on their turf. He would create his own battlefield, one dictated by his rules. He retrieved a burner phone from a hidden compartment in his locker, a holdover from a past life he'd hoped never to need again. He then accessed a small, ruggedized laptop, a Panasonic Toughbook that had survived more than one war zone. He plugged in a secured, encrypted hard drive. On it was his real life's work, a suite of software, and a list of contacts that didn't exist in any official directory. His first priority was intelligence gathering. He needed to know everything about Sergeant Rick O'Malley, Officer Kyle Bishop, and Officer Frank Miller. Not just their professional lives, but their personal lives, their routines, their debts, their vices, their fears. An enemy you don't understand is an enemy that can surprise you. Isaiah Washington did not like surprises. He started with O'Malley. Using a series of masked IP addresses and backdoor search algorithms, he began to build a digital picture of the man. Public records, social media, property deeds, court filings. O'Malley lived in a suburb called Chestnut Hill, in a house that seemed modest for a sergeant's salary. He was married to a woman named Cynthia O'Malley, a stay-at-home mother. They had 2 teenage daughters. On the surface, it was the picture of middle-class respectability. But Isaiah dug deeper. He found O'Malley's name mentioned in a handful of civil suits against the Port Sterling PD, all alleging excessive force or wrongful seizure. All had been dismissed. He found photos from the police union's annual gala. O'Malley smiling, arm in arm with city council members and the police commissioner, David Webb. He was well-connected, insulated. Then a flicker of something interesting, a property record for a small secluded lake cabin 2 hours north of the city. It was owned by an LLC with a generic name, but a cross-reference of the registered agent's address led him back to O'Malley's brother-in-law. It was a place off the books, a potential safe house or a meeting spot. Isaiah downloaded the satellite imagery, mapping the access roads and surrounding terrain. Next was Kyle Bishop, the enforcer. Bishop was younger, louder, and dumber. His digital footprint was a mess of arrogant social media posts. Photos of him at bars, flexing his muscles, posing with his souped-up Dodge Charger. He lived in a downtown condo he couldn't possibly afford on a patrolman's salary. A quick financial background search pulled through a contact in the credit industry he only knew as Oracle, revealed the truth. Bishop was drowning in debt, gambling debt, online sports betting sites, high-interest credit cards, a personal loan from a shady lender. Bishop wasn't just corrupt for power, he was corrupt out of desperation. He was volatile, a weak point masquerading as strength. Finally, he came to Frank Miller, the reluctant one, the weak link. Miller's digital life was quiet, almost non-existent. A modest home, a 20-year mortgage, a wife who worked as a nurse at Port Sterling General Hospital, 2 kids in college. Isaiah found a local news article from 5 years ago. Miller had received a commendation for pulling a family from a burning car. He was once a good cop. What had happened? What had turned him into O'Malley's sheep? Digging into hospital records, a line he crossed without hesitation, he found what he was looking for. Miller's wife, Karen, had battled a rare form of cancer 3 years ago. The treatments had been astronomically expensive, far exceeding their insurance coverage. They had refinanced their home, emptied their savings. They were financially crippled. There it was, the leverage. O'Malley had the connections, Bishop had the desperate greed, and Miller had the crushing weight of a man who had compromised his soul to save his family. Isaiah now understood the internal dynamics of the crew. O'Malley was the brain, Bishop was the muscle, and Miller was the unwilling conscience they needed to appear legitimate. His digital reconnaissance complete, Isaiah moved to phase 2, physical surveillance. He couldn't risk being seen, so he became a ghost. He used the maintenance tunnels beneath the city to get close to the precinct headquarters. From a grimy ventilation shaft across the street, he spent 6 hours with a high-powered microphone and a telescopic lens, observing the shift change. He recorded their routines, the cars they drove, the people they talked to. He followed Bishop one night, staying 3 cars back on his motorcycle, a nondescript bike he kept for such occasions. He watched him meet a bookie in a dimly lit alley and hand over a thick envelope of cash. Isaiah recorded the entire exchange on a microcamera. He tailed Miller to a church basement for a support group meeting. Not AA, but a group for families of cancer survivors. Isaiah sat in his truck a block away, listening via a laser microphone aimed at the window. He heard Miller's voice, thick with emotion, talking about the compromises he'd had to make, the man he no longer recognized in the mirror. He wasn't talking about his wife's illness. He was confessing his sins to a room full of strangers, using the only language he had left. The most difficult surveillance was on O'Malley. The sergeant was cautious, almost paranoid. He varied his routes home, regularly checked his rearview mirror. He was a man with secrets to keep, but Isaiah was better. For 2 decades, his life had depended on his ability to track men far more skilled and dangerous than Rick O'Malley. He found O'Malley's weakness. On Thursday nights, O'Malley didn't go straight home. He drove to a nondescript motel on the edge of the city, the kind that rented rooms by the hour. He always parked in the back, away from the streetlights. A few minutes later, another car would arrive. The driver was a young, ambitious rookie cop named Jessica Riley. Isaiah documented it all, time-stamped photos, video footage of them entering and leaving the same room, even audio recordings from a bug he'd managed to plant on the underside of O'Malley's car during a brief stop at a gas station. After 3 days of relentless, 24/7 intelligence gathering, Isaiah sat in his quiet workshop, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face. He had a complete picture of his enemies. He had their schedules, their financial situations, their personal secrets, and their psychological profiles. He had everything he needed to dismantle their lives completely. He looked at the empty space where his plasma cutter used to be, the machine he'd saved for years to buy. He thought of the cash, the deposit from a client who had trusted him. They had mistaken his quiet for weakness. They had mistaken his peace for passivity. Now he would teach them the difference between a business owner and a Tier 1 operator. He wasn't going to fight them. He was going to hunt them. And the hunt had just begun. A predator doesn't always strike the strongest of the herd first. It tests the edges, isolates the weak, and creates panic. Isaiah Washington's first move was not against O'Malley or the volatile Bishop, but against the fractured conscience of the crew, Officer Frank Miller. He didn't confront him. He didn't threaten him. He began a campaign of subtle, psychological pressure. The first whisper came in the mail. Inside a plain white envelope sent to the Miller residence was a single high-resolution photograph. It was a picture of Miller's wife, Karen, smiling as she tended to her garden, looking healthy and happy. There was no note, no threat, just the picture. But for a man drowning in guilt, the message was terrifyingly clear. I know who you are. I know where you live. I know what you value. Frank Miller spent the entire night awake, staring at the ceiling, the photograph on his nightstand a silent accusation. He told himself it was a coincidence, a piece of junk mail. But he knew it wasn't. He thought back to the raid on Washington Ironworks, to the quiet, intense gaze of the owner, a gaze that had seen right through him. The next day, Miller was on edge. Every car that drove slowly down his street was a threat. Every unfamiliar face in the grocery store was a potential spy. At work, he was jumpy and irritable. "What's eating you, Frankie?" O'Malley asked during their shift briefing. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Nothing. Just tired," Miller lied, his eyes darting around the room. Isaiah's second move was more direct. He used a voice modulator and a spoof number to make a call to the nurses' station at Port Sterling General Hospital, where Karen Miller worked. "Is this Karen Miller's station?" the distorted voice asked. "She's with a patient right now. Can I take a message?" The charge nurse replied. "Yes," the voice said, slow and deliberate. "Tell her that her husband's business partners are putting her health at risk. Tell her to ask Frank about Washington Ironworks. He'll know what it means." The line went dead. The message was relayed to Karen. When Frank came home that evening, exhausted and paranoid, he was met not with a warm hug, but with a question that turned his blood to ice. "Frank, who is Washington Ironworks?" Karen asked, her face pale with a fear he hadn't seen since her diagnosis. "Someone called the hospital. They said you were in some kind of trouble." The foundation of Miller's world cracked. He had justified his actions, telling himself he was protecting his family from financial ruin. Now his actions had brought the threat directly to their doorstep, to the one person he had compromised himself to protect. The lie he had built his life on was collapsing. While Miller stewed in his own personal hell, Isaiah turned his attention to Officer Kyle Bishop. Bishop's weakness was not his conscience, but his ego and his crippling debt. Isaiah's approach here was brutally simple. He created a fake online profile, a stunningly attractive woman, and began interacting with Bishop on his public social media. Bishop, arrogant and stupid, took the bait immediately. After a few days of flirtatious messages, the profile sent him a link. "Hey, you mentioned you like to bet on games? My cousin runs this private site. The odds are insane. You should check it out." The link led to a meticulously crafted phantom betting site, a mirror image of the real ones Bishop used, but this one was entirely controlled by Isaiah. He let Bishop win a few small bets to build his confidence. Then he presented the hook, a guaranteed high-stakes bet on an international soccer match, with odds that could clear a significant chunk of Bishop's debt. Drunk on his recent small wins and desperate for a big score, Bishop scraped together every cent he had and borrowed more from his bookie. He placed a massive bet, and then he lost. The website vanished. His money was gone. Bishop was frantic. He now owed his bookie, a notoriously violent man named Sal, an even larger sum. The pressure intensified. Sal's polite requests for payment became thinly veiled threats. Bishop started showing up to work looking haggard, his usual swagger replaced by a desperate, hunted look. He started making mistakes, pulling over the wrong cars, being overly aggressive on calls. He needed money, and he needed it fast. His desperation made him sloppy. He began pushing O'Malley for another score. "Sarge, we gotta find another target," Bishop said one afternoon in the precinct parking lot. "I'm in deep. I need a payday." "Calm down, Kyle," O'Malley snapped, annoyed by his subordinate's lack of composure. "You get greedy, you get caught. We lay low for a bit. That metalworker guy was a little too calm. I don't like it." "Calm? He was terrified," Bishop shot back. "We walk in, we take what we want. That's how it works. What's the point of having the badge if we don't use it?" The first seeds of dissent were sown. O'Malley saw Bishop's desperation as a liability. Bishop saw O'Malley's caution as weakness. With the two subordinates destabilized, Isaiah finally moved on the leader. His attack on O'Malley was the most subtle of all. He didn't want to spook him. He wanted to make him arrogant. Isaiah located the scrap dealer O'Malley's crew used to fence stolen goods. It was a grimy, mob-connected yard on the industrial outskirts of the city. He knew O'Malley would be trying to sell his new high-end plasma cutter, an item that valuable and specialized would be hard to move quickly. Posing as a broker for a non-existent construction firm in a neighboring state, Isaiah called the scrap dealer. "I hear you can source heavy equipment, no questions asked," he said in a disguised voice. "I need a late-model plasma cutter, top dollar for the right machine." He described his own stolen machine perfectly. The scrap dealer, smelling a huge profit, immediately called O'Malley. "That thing you mentioned? I got a buyer lined up, a rich out-of-state contractor. He's willing to pay 60 cents on the dollar in cash." The score was huge, a potential $30,000 payday. For O'Malley, it was a confirmation of his superiority. The metalworker had done nothing. He was just another victim, just as O'Malley had predicted. His caution evaporated, replaced by greed. He called Bishop. "Change of plans. That plasma cutter? We're selling it. Friday night. You, me, and Frank will move it from the impound lockup." "Finally," Bishop breathed, relieved. But O'Malley had a second, more personal problem brewing. One evening, his wife Cynthia was checking their bank statements online when she noticed a recurring charge from a florist she didn't recognize. Curious, she looked up the address. It was a shop near the precinct. She called them. "Hi, I'm just checking on a charge. My husband's name is Rick O'Malley." "Oh, yes," the cheerful florist replied. "Sergeant O'Malley is one of our best customers. He has a standing order, a dozen roses every Thursday, delivered to a P.O. box. He's so romantic." Cynthia hung up the phone, her heart hammering in her chest. Rick hadn't bought her flowers in 10 years, and he certainly hadn't had them delivered to a P.O. box. That night, she confronted him. The argument was explosive. O'Malley denied everything, but his denials were weak, cornered. The trust in their marriage, already worn thin by years of his anger and secrecy, shattered. Within a single week, Isaiah Washington, without ever showing his face or making a direct threat, had systematically dismantled the personal lives of his three enemies. Miller was a paranoid wreck, terrified for his family's safety. Bishop was a desperate gambler on the verge of being kneecapped by a loan shark. And O'Malley's carefully constructed home life was imploding, just as greed was making him reckless. The crew was fractured. Their judgment was clouded. They were walking into the next phase of Isaiah's plan exactly as he had predicted. They were wounded, bleeding, and separated from the herd, the perfect state for a predator to move in for the kill. The plan to sell the plasma cutter was the linchpin of Isaiah's operation. It was the bait, the objective, and the trigger for the trap. In military terms, he was preparing a kill box, a designated area where the enemy would be channeled, contained, and eliminated. His kill box wasn't a valley in Afghanistan. It was a corrupt police impound lot and a grimy scrapyard on the edge of Port Sterling. Isaiah's intelligence had given him the layout of the city impound lot, where his plasma cutter was being unofficially stored. It was a sprawling, poorly lit facility surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Security was lax, consisting of one sleepy night watchman and a few aging CCTV cameras, half of which, Isaiah discovered, through a quick hack of the city's network, were non-operational. He knew O'Malley would move the machine himself. He wouldn't trust a low-level officer with a $30,000 illicit sale. He also knew they would use an unofficial vehicle, likely a confiscated van from the lot itself, to avoid any official paper trail. The night of the planned move was cold and moonless, a sheet of gray clouds smothering the city's light pollution. It was perfect. Isaiah was in position 2 hours before they were scheduled to arrive. He wasn't on a rooftop or in a nearby building. He was inside the kill box itself, having slipped through a blind spot in the fence line with the ease of a shadow. He was dressed in dark, functional clothing, his face smeared with black grease paint, not for camouflage, but to prevent any reflection. He was a ghost in the graveyard of wrecked cars. He had 3 objectives for the night. 1. Plant trackers on their vehicle in the plasma cutter. 2. Obtain undeniable, high-quality audio and video evidence of the crime. 3. Ensure the machine was damaged just enough to be unsellable but easily repairable by him later. From his hiding spot behind a stack of crushed sedans, he watched them arrive. O'Malley, Bishop, and a reluctant Miller pulled up in O'Malley's personal SUV. They were already arguing. Bishop was agitated, pacing back and forth. Miller looked sick, his face pale in the faint security lights. "Just get the van, Frank," O'Malley hissed. "The sooner we do this, the sooner we get paid and Kyle can stop whining." Miller retrieved the keys to a windowless Ford Econoline van from the night watchman's office, who barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. As they backed the van up to the storage container where the plasma cutter was stashed, Isaiah moved. Silent as smoke, he crept to O'Malley's SUV and placed a small magnetic GPS tracker in the rear wheel well. He then slipped back into the shadows and deployed his primary surveillance tools, 3 micro-drones no bigger than dragonflies. They were military-grade, silent, and equipped with high-definition thermal and night vision cameras. He had acquired them through a former Delta contact known only as Ghost, a tech wizard who now ran a very private security consultancy. The drones rose silently into the night air, taking up positions that gave Isaiah a complete multi-angle view of the entire scene. He monitored the feeds on his ruggedized tablet, the thermal imaging cutting through the darkness, showing the 3 officers as bright, anxious figures. He recorded everything. The strained grunts as they loaded the heavy plasma cutter into the van. Their conversation, picked up by a drone's laser microphone, was pure gold. "Can't believe we're finally getting rid of this thing," Bishop said, his voice a mix of greed and relief. "Sal's been calling me every damn hour." "Shut up about Sal," O'Malley snarled. "You get your money when I get mine, and you're getting a smaller cut for being a pain in my ass." "What? That's not the deal." "The deal is what I say it is," O'Malley shot back, his voice echoing slightly in the metal van. Miller's voice was barely a whisper. "Rick, this is crazy. It's a felony. We're stealing from the evidence locker." "It was never officially logged as evidence, Frank," O'Malley corrected him. "As far as the department knows, this machine doesn't exist. Now stop sniveling and close the damn doors." Click. Isaiah smiled in the darkness. He had it. A confession. Conspiracy to commit theft, recorded in crystal clear audio and 4K video. As they slammed the van doors, Isaiah executed his final objective. While 2 drones continued to record the officers, the third zipped down to the van's rear tire and used a tiny precision magnetic device to attach a second GPS tracker to the chassis. Then it flew to the plasma cutter itself, visible through the van's grimy rear window, and attached a third, even smaller tracker directly onto the machine's housing. He now had eyes on O'Malley, his vehicle, and his property. The van pulled out of the impound lot, heading for the scrapyard. Isaiah didn't follow. He didn't need to. He simply collapsed his drones, slipped back out of the fence, and got on his motorcycle. He was heading to the scrapyard too, but he'd be there long before them, taking a route he had already mapped. The scrapyard was an even better location for an ambush. Mountains of twisted metal created a labyrinth of shadows and choke points. The owner, a fat, greasy man named Enzo, who was in O'Malley's pocket, was waiting for them near the main office. Isaiah, hidden atop a massive pile of crushed shipping containers, had a perfect vantage point. He watched the van pull in. He saw Enzo greet O'Malley, and the out-of-state contractor, a burly associate of Enzo's, step out to inspect the goods. They opened the van doors. The contractor looked the machine over, then nodded. "Looks good. Let's get it on the scale." As Bishop and Enzo's man struggled to move the heavy machine, O'Malley and Enzo walked toward the office, presumably to handle the cash. This was the moment Isaiah had been waiting for. From his perch, he aimed a custom-built, silenced rifle. It wasn't loaded with a bullet. The projectile was a small, dense rubber slug, non-lethal but capable of delivering a powerful, focused impact. His target wasn't a person. It was the plasma cutter's delicate control panel. He exhaled, his training taking over. The world narrowed to the view through his scope. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle coughed almost silently. The slug flew through the night and struck the control panel with a sharp crack. The screen shattered and a shower of small sparks erupted from the casing. "What the hell was that?" Bishop yelled, dropping his side of the machine. The contractor cursed, jumping back. "The damn thing's broken! Look at it! The control board is shot!" O'Malley and Enzo came running out of the office. O'Malley's face was a mask of fury as he saw the damaged machine. "What did you do?" he screamed at Bishop. "I didn't do anything. It just sparked." The contractor threw his hands up in disgust. "The deal's off. I'm not paying a dime for broken junk." He got in his car and sped off, leaving O'Malley's crew standing in the scrapyard with a now worthless piece of stolen equipment. The sale had fallen through. The payday was gone. The pressure on Bishop would not be relieved, it would be magnified. The carefully laid plan had crumbled into dust. And high above, Isaiah Washington recorded their frantic, panicked argument, a silent predator watching his trap spring shut with perfect, satisfying precision. He had his evidence. He had sown chaos and distrust. He had turned their greed against them. Now it was time to deliver the karma. With the evidence secured, Isaiah Washington transitioned from hunter to ghost. He became an invisible architect of ruin, manipulating events from the shadows. His goal was not merely to expose them, but to have them systematically dismantle each other, to make them feel the walls of their own corruption closing in. His first move was against the crew's fractured soul, Officer Frank Miller. A small package arrived at Miller's home containing a burner phone. The moment he held it, it rang. The voice on the other end was a modulated, calm specter of doom. "Officer Miller, I have the full recording of your felony theft from the impound lot last night. Your choice is simple. Go to prison with them, or save yourself." Miller, trembling, asked what he had to do. "You will be given a time and a place," the voice said. "You will go there, and you will tell the truth to the people waiting for you. A USB drive is in the package. Watch it and then decide which man you want to be." The line went dead. The drive contained a crystal-clear video of the crime, a digital sword of Damocles now hanging over Miller's head, forcing him toward a final, fateful choice. Next, Isaiah turned up the heat on the volatile Kyle Bishop. The failed sale meant Bishop's debt to his violent bookie Sal had come due. After Bishop found his car tires slashed, Isaiah made an anonymous, voice-modulated call. "Looking for Bishop's money," he told Sal. His boss, Sergeant O'Malley, took the whole score for himself. 30 grand. Cut the kid out completely. The lie was a perfectly crafted wedge. Sal, a man who understood greed, immediately shifted his focus. The threat moved from the desperate patrolman to the powerful sergeant. This ignited a firestorm within the crew. Bishop, cornered and terrified, confronted O'Malley in the precinct locker room, screaming about the bookie. "This is your fault. You have to help me. You're a degenerate gambler and a liability," O'Malley snarled, shoving him against a locker, his own life already unraveling from the stress at home. "This is your problem. Deal with it." The alliance forged in greed was now shattered by paranoia and fear. Finally, Isaiah set the stage for O'Malley's complete annihilation. He prepared 3 anonymous evidence packages, a coordinated, 3-pronged strike designed for maximum devastation. The first went to Sarah Jenkins, a tenacious investigative reporter known for exposing police misconduct. It contained the full video of the theft, photos of O'Malley's motel affair with Officer Jessica Riley, and a detailed breakdown of their entire civil forfeiture scam. The second package went to the FBI's Public Integrity section. It included the same video evidence, but with a critical addition: the live GPS tracking data for the stolen plasma cutter, which O'Malley had panicked and moved to his secluded lake cabin. It was an irresistible, warrant-ready case. The third and most brutal package was sent directly to O'Malley's wife, Cynthia. It contained only a high-definition video of her husband's motel trysts, overlaid with audio from the car bug where O'Malley promised his mistress he would leave his family. The packages landed like synchronized bombs. The consequences were swift and catastrophic. The cascade began at home. Cynthia O'Malley saw the video and threw her husband's belongings onto the lawn, along with a restraining order. That same morning, the Port Sterling Herald hit the streets with Sarah Jenkins's front-page bombshell, igniting a citywide scandal. Before O'Malley could even process the professional and personal ruin, the FBI, armed with a federal warrant courtesy of Isaiah's GPS data, raided his lake cabin. They found a drunk and despondent O'Malley sitting next to the stolen machine and arrested him on the spot. Simultaneously, another team of agents entered the precinct and took a stunned Kyle Bishop into custody. Across town, a pale but resolved Frank Miller kept his appointment at a quiet park, where two FBI agents were waiting. His confession would be the final nail in the coffin. From his workshop, Isaiah watched the news on his laptop. He saw the broken men, the press conferences, the promises of reform. He felt no joy, only a grim, quiet satisfaction. The mission was complete. The scales were balanced. He closed the laptop and returned to his anvil, the fire in his forge burning steady and bright. The fallout from the O'Malley scandal was a cleansing fire that swept through the Port Sterling Police Department. The story, amplified by Sarah Jenkins's relentless reporting, became a national headline, a textbook case of corruption brought to light. The city was forced to act. Rick O'Malley, faced with a mountain of undeniable evidence and abandoned by the department he had used as his personal piggy bank, was utterly broken. The affair with Officer Riley became public knowledge, ending her career and making his disgrace absolute. His wife, Cynthia, filed for a divorce that stripped him of his assets, including the house he could no longer enter. The police union, which had protected him for years, publicly disavowed him to save face. In court, he was a shell of the arrogant sergeant who had swaggered into Washington Ironworks. He was convicted on federal charges of theft, conspiracy, and deprivation of rights under color of law. The judge, making an example of him, sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. The predator was now caged. Kyle Bishop, desperate to avoid a long sentence and the wrath of Sal the bookie, sang like a canary. He confessed to everything, implicating O'Malley in a dozen other shakedowns and scams they had run over the years. His testimony, combined with Frank Miller's, opened up a floodgate of new investigations. His cooperation earned him a reduced sentence of 5 years, but his life was ruined. He would forever be known as a corrupt cop who had turned on his own. Sal the bookie, after being questioned by the FBI about his connection to Bishop, quietly vanished, likely deciding Port Sterling was no longer a healthy business environment. Frank Miller became the unexpected face of redemption. By cooperating fully with the FBI and testifying against O'Malley and Bishop, he was granted immunity from prosecution. He resigned from the police force in disgrace, losing his pension but saving his freedom. He and his wife Karen sold their house and moved to a small town upstate, seeking anonymity and a chance to heal. He had lost his career, but in the process, he had found the man he thought he had lost forever, the one who could look at himself in the mirror. He had made a terrible series of choices, but in the end, when given one last chance, he had chosen right. The shockwaves continued to spread. Police Commissioner David Webb, whose close ties to O'Malley were exposed by Jenkins, was forced to resign. The FBI's wider investigation, sparked by Miller's and Bishop's testimony, led to the indictment of 7 other officers and a complete overhaul of the department's asset forfeiture unit. The city was forced to review hundreds of past cases, returning millions of dollars in wrongfully seized property to its citizens. Through it all, Isaiah Washington remained invisible. The FBI, in their debriefings, asked Miller where the tip and the evidence had come from. "I don't know," Miller answered truthfully. "A voice on a phone. It felt like it came from God." The agents were skeptical but had no leads. The tech they found was untraceable, the methods professional and ghostly. They suspected a highly skilled external actor, but they had no proof, no name, and no direction to look. The case of the Port Sterling ghost, as some agents privately called it, became a low-priority mystery. A month after the sentencing, a flatbed truck pulled up to Washington Ironworks. 2 bewildered city employees, under orders from the U.S. Attorney's Office, unloaded his plasma cutter. It was returned with a formal letter of apology from the new acting police commissioner. The control panel was shattered, just as he'd left it. Isaiah signed the paperwork, his expression unreadable. He spent the next 2 days meticulously repairing the machine. He replaced the control panel, recalibrated the systems, and cleaned every component. It was a ritual, another act of restoring order. As the machine hummed back to life, its familiar electronic whine, a welcome sound in the shop, Kevin and Maria watched their boss with a new sense of awe. They, like the rest of the city, had seen the news. They didn't know the details, but they knew that the men who had wronged their boss had been utterly destroyed. They never asked him about it. They didn't have to. The karma had not just hit back, It had been aimed, guided, and delivered with the surgical precision of a special operator. O'Malley had thought he was a hammer, but he had struck an anvil, and in the end, it was the hammer that had shattered. 6 months passed. The seasons in Port Sterling turned, washing the city's grit with autumn rain, and then a thin blanket of winter snow. The scandal, once a roaring bonfire, had settled into the city's institutional memory, a cautionary tale whispered in the police academy and cited in council meetings. Washington Ironworks thrived. The publicity from the case, though indirect, had an unexpected effect. Isaiah was no longer just a metalworker. He was a local legend. The quiet, powerful black man whose corrupt tormentors had been mysteriously and completely annihilated. People didn't know the truth, but they created their own myths. They saw him as a symbol of resilience, of unspoken justice. Commissions poured in. He hired 2 more apprentices and expanded into the adjacent warehouse. He was building again, bigger and better than before. He was at the forge one cold Tuesday afternoon, the rhythmic clang, clang, clang of his hammer on hot steel echoing through the vast space. He was forging a railing, the steel glowing orange-white, pliable under his expert hand. He worked with the same focused intensity, the same serene control. The warrior was dormant again, the blacksmith at peace. The front door opened, letting in a swirl of cold air. Isaiah finished his sequence, quenched the steel in a hiss of steam, and turned. Standing just inside the doorway was a man in a tailored gray suit. He was older, with sharp eyes and a weary but intelligent face. Isaiah didn't recognize him, but he recognized the type. Federal, high level. "Mr. Washington," the man said, his voice calm and respectful. He walked forward, his expensive shoes silent on the concrete floor. He didn't offer a hand. "My name is Robert Kendrick. I'm the special agent in charge at the local FBI field office." Isaiah simply nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. He waited. "I came down here to officially close a loop," Kendrick continued, his eyes scanning the workshop, taking in the size of the forge, the power of the hammers, the precision of the tools. "The O'Malley case. It's all wrapped up. The city's better for it. A lot of people got their property and their faith back." "Good to hear," Isaiah said, his voice a low rumble. Kendrick stopped a few feet away, his gaze finally settling on Isaiah. It was a look of professional curiosity, of a man who has a puzzle with one piece that doesn't quite fit. "The evidence that broke the case, the videos, the audio, it was a work of art, professionally acquired, anonymously delivered. Whoever did it ran a textbook intelligence operation. They dismantled that crew from the inside out. They used psychological warfare, electronic surveillance. They even knew which reporter to send it to for maximum impact." Isaiah remained silent, his expression a placid mask. "We ran your background, of course," Kendrick said softly. "Sealed military record. Very impressive. What little we could get unsealed. First Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Multiple commendations for actions that are still classified. You're a man who knows how to run an operation." Kendrick paused, letting the words hang in the air between them, amidst the smell of coal smoke and cooling steel. "I'm not here to ask you questions, Mr. Washington. I'm not here to open an investigation. Frankly, whoever did what was done performed a public service that our office would have spent years and millions of dollars trying to accomplish. They saved the city from a cancer." He took a step closer. "I'm here to say thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and to give you a piece of friendly, off-the-record advice. You're a ghost. Stay one. Ghosts don't leave tracks." Isaiah held the agent's gaze for a long moment. He saw a man who knew the truth, or at least suspected it with near certainty, and had made a deliberate choice to let it lie. A quiet understanding passed between them, a respect between 2 very different kinds of professionals who understood that justice sometimes takes paths not found in law books. Finally, Isaiah gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I'm just a blacksmith, Agent Kendrick." Kendrick's lips curved into a faint, weary smile. "Of course you are. Have a good day, sir." He turned and walked out, leaving Isaiah alone once more in his sanctuary. Isaiah stood for a long time in the quiet of his shop. The piece he had fought so hard to build had been threatened, and he had defended it with the only skills he had. He had unleashed the storm, And now the silence in its wake was all the more profound. He turned back to the forge. The coals were still glowing, waiting for him. He picked up his hammer, its familiar weight a comfort in his hand. He took a piece of raw steel, thrust it into the roaring heart of the fire, and waited for it to glow. The world outside could be a chaotic, unjust place, but in here, with the fire and the steel and the hammer, he was in control. He was a creator, and he was finally at peace. That's the story of Isaiah Washington, a man who proves that the most dangerous people are often the ones who seek a quiet life. It's a stark reminder that beneath the surface of any ordinary person might lie extraordinary strength, forged in fires we can only imagine. They didn't just rob a business. They awoke a warrior who brought a righteous and calculated storm of karma down upon their heads. This wasn't just revenge, it was a masterclass in justice, where the scales were balanced not by a court, but by the unwavering hand of a man who was pushed too far. If this story of calculated karma and hidden strength resonated with you, show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who appreciates a story where the bullies finally meet their match. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next story where the hunters become the hunted. Thank you for listening.